The repair bay hummed with the low thrum of recycled air and distant machinery. Henry leaned against the scarred bulkhead, watching the small human work on his combat armor with practiced efficiency. She hadn't spoken since he'd entered, hadn't asked questions, hadn't done anything except gesture toward the diagnostic table and begin her work. That alone marked her as unusual. Most mechanics in the Coalition stations were Vryn or Kelthra species, who'd been traveling the stars for millennia, before humanity had even discovered fire. They talked constantly, filled silence with status updates and philosophical musings about metallurgy. But this human, this quiet woman with oil-streaked coveralls and steady hands, simply worked. Henry was Zeltheri, a species known across 7 sectors for their warriors. His kind had fought in the Coalition's defense forces for 3 generations, earning respect through blood and valor. But humans, they were the newcomers, the strange primates from Sol System who'd barely joined the galactic community 2 decades ago. Most were merchants, diplomats, scientists, soft roles for a soft species. Or so he'd thought. The woman Asa, according to the name patch on her coveralls, moved around his armor plating with surprising knowledge. She wasn't just patching blast damage. She was reinforcing weak points, recalibrating the servo motors, upgrading the thermal shielding with techniques he didn't recognize. Her fingers danced across panels and circuitry like she'd designed the armor herself. "You know Zeltheri combat systems," Henry said finally, his translator rendering his clicks and whistles into standard Coalition tongue. Asa glanced up briefly, her dark eyes meeting his for optical sensors. She nodded once, then returned to her work. Henry's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "Most mechanics refuse to work on our equipment. They say it's too aggressive, too brutal. They say it reflects our nature." Her hands never stopped moving. "Equipment reflects its purpose," she said quietly, "not the one who wears it." The insight surprised him. Henry shifted his weight, his Karapachi plates scraping against the wall. "You're far from Sol System. The war doesn't reach these stations. Why are you here?" "Same reason you are," Asa replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Someone has to be." Before Henry could respond, the repair bay's alarm shrieked to life. Red emergency lights bathed the room in crimson as the station's defensive klaxons wailed. Henry's combat instincts surged immediately. Krell raiders, the Coalition's most persistent enemy, known for hitting remote stations like this one. "Get to the civilian shelters," Henry commanded, already moving toward his armor. It wasn't fully repaired, but it would have to do. Asa's hands blurred across the final panel. 30 seconds. "I can get the main systems online. There's no time." 30 seconds, she repeated, her voice carrying an edge of steel that stopped his protest. Henry watched, astonished, as she worked with controlled fury. Her fingers flew across connections, rerouting power, bypassing damaged circuits. 28 seconds later, his armor's systems hummed to full power, better than they'd been in months. "Go," Asa said simply. Henry sealed himself into the armor, feeling the familiar weight settle across his frame. Through the bay's viewports, he could see Krell attack craft swarming the station's outer defenses. The Coalition guards were already falling back, outmatched and outgunned. He turned back to Asa one final time. "Get to safety." "That's an order." She was already moving toward a supply locker, pulling out equipment he couldn't quite see. "I don't take orders well," she said. Then Henry was running, his armor's servos carrying him toward the breach points, where Krell boarders would be cutting through. He found the first team in Corridor 7-6, Krell shock troops with plasma cutters and assault weapons. Henry tore through them with practiced brutality, his armor's systems responding flawlessly to every command. More Krell poured through. Henry held the corridor, buying time for evacuation. But even his enhanced armor couldn't withstand the concentrated fire forever. Warnings flashed across his helmet: display shields failing, ammunition depleting, structural integrity compromising. Then something impossible happened. Plasma fire erupted from behind the Krell positions, precise, devastating shots that punched through their armor like paper. Henry's sensors tracked the source and found Asa, now clad in combat gear that looked like it had seen 1,000 battles, wielding a weapon that no civilian should possess. But it was the way she moved that shocked him. She fought like a Zeltheri warrior, no, better than most Zelthari warriors. Every motion was economical, perfect, lethal. She didn't just know combat. She understood it at a fundamental level that came only from surviving wars together. They drove the Krell back. Henry handled the front assault while Asa provided devastating covering fire. Her shots never missing, her positioning flawless. When the last Krell raider fled to their ships and jumped to FTL, the corridor was littered with bodies, and Henry's armor was barely holding together. He turned to Asa, a dozen questions burning through his mind. She was already holstering her weapon, her face unreadable. But as she reached up to wipe sweat from her brow, Henry's enhanced optics caught something on her wrist, a mark, partially hidden beneath her sleeve. The Earthborn seal. Henry's entire understanding shifted in that instant. He'd heard rumors, whispers shared in warrior circles across Coalition space, stories of human soldiers who'd fought in their own brutal wars before joining the greater galactic community. Conflicts so savage that even the Zelthari, who prided themselves on martial prowess, spoke of them with respect and horror. The Earthborn seal wasn't just a mark, it was a testament. It meant this quiet mechanic had survived humanity's worst wars that had nearly destroyed their species before they'd reached the stars. Wars that had forged soldiers so capable, so adaptable, that they'd proven themselves against threats the galaxy had never imagined. Henry began, his translator struggling to convey his tone. A mechanic, Asa finished quietly, pulling her sleeve down. Who sometimes remembers old habits. She walked back toward the repair bay, leaving Henry standing in the ruined corridor. He watched her go, this small human who'd saved his life, who'd fought like a legend, who carried the scars of Earth's darkest age. The galaxy thought humans were soft because they chose diplomacy over warfare, science over combat. But Henry understood now. They weren't soft. They were survivors who'd climbed from their own ashes, who'd learned the cost of violence so well that they chose peace instead. And when peace failed, they remembered. Henry looked down at his armor, perfectly repaired by those same scarred hands. In the Zelthari language, there was a phrase roughly translated as "warrior recognize is warrior." He'd thought himself one of the Coalition's finest fighters, but Asa had taught him something more important. The deadliest warriors were often the ones who never wanted to fight again. As the emergency lights faded and the station began damage assessments, Henry made a decision. When the Coalition asked for his report, he would tell them the truth, that the station's survival owed everything to a quiet mechanic who'd simply done what humans do best, whatever it takes to protect those who cannot protect themselves, even if it means remembering the wars they'd rather forget.